Malik didn't have much, but he had a sharp eye and a quiet strength that life on the streets had carved into him. At just 13, he'd already learned how to read people better than most adults. He knew which bakery tossed out fresh bread at closing, which alleys stayed warmest at night, and which houses to avoid. That morning, he wandered through a quiet, upscale neighborhood, following the scent of something warm, maybe soup, maybe stew. His stomach growled, but he kept walking. The towering iron gates of a pristine white mansion caught his attention. Everything about it felt untouched. The manicured hedges, the sleek cars, the silence behind the glass. He stopped near the side entrance, out of sight, just long enough to catch his breath. What he didn't expect was to glimpse a woman in designer heels standing by a kitchen counter, inside hovering over a bowl of soup with a bottle of something small and dark in her hand. Malik narrowed his eyes. He couldn't name what he saw, but he knew trouble when it showed itself, and in that moment, everything changed. Malik shifted his weight, unsure if he should walk away or stay hidden. Something deep in his gut told him this wasn't just some fancy ingredient being added. The woman, Marissa, though he didn't know her name, yet moved quickly, her eyes darting to the doorway before stirring the soup like nothing had happened. Moments later, she carried the bowl out of sight, toward the dining room. Malik crept a few steps closer, crouching behind a stone planter just beneath an open window. He could hear muffled voices inside hers, calm and sweet, a man's deeper, unaware. "Your favorite," she said. "I made it just the way you like." There was a pause, then the soft clink of a spoon against porcelain. Malik's heart thudded. He didn't know this man, but something told him he didn't deserve what was coming. Malik's life had taught him to mind his own business, stay invisible, stay safe. But right now, he was the only one who knew, and with each second that passed, the weight of that truth grew heavier on his shoulders. Malik didn't have a plangist instinct. His feet were already moving before he could stop himself. He circled around the side of the house, heart pounding, until he reached the front steps. He hesitated for half a second, then pushed the door open. It was unlocked. The polished wood floor beneath his worn sneakers felt too clean, too out of place. Voices drifted from the dining room just down the hall. He followed them. "Excuse me," he shouted, voice cracking. The room went silent. Bernard, a silver-haired man in a navy blazer, looked up from his seat, spoon halfway to his mouth. Marissa stood behind him, frozen mid-step, her expression flickering from confusion to fury. "Don't eat that!" Malik cried out, louder this time. "She put something in it!" The words echoed louder than he expected, bouncing off the tall ceilings and expensive art. Bernard blinked, hands suspended. Marissa's smile vanished. "Who let this child in here?" she snapped. "He's trespassing!" Malik didn't flinch. "I saw her. In the kitchen." She added something from a bottle. For a moment, no one moved. Then Bernard slowly set down his spoon and looked at his weave knot with panic, but with something colder, suspicion. Bernard stood up slowly, pushing his chair back without a word. The bowl of soup remained untouched, steam curling upward like a quiet warning. "Marissa," he said carefully, his voice low and steady, "is there something you want to explain?" She let out a short, bitter laugh, too sharp to be natural. "You're seriously listening to a homeless kid who broke into our house?" Her eyes darted to Malik, who stood rooted just inside the doorway, fists clenched, chest heaving. "This is absurd." Bernard didn't respond right away. He studied her the way he might examine a complicated business deal, measured, focused, no emotion on his face. "He said he saw you put something in my food." "And you believe him?" she snapped. "A child off the street?" "That child just risked walking into a stranger's home to stop me from eating something you made." His gaze didn't waver. "That says something." Marissa's expression faltered. "It was nothing. Just herbs," she said too quickly. "You know I always add extra flavor." Bernard stepped closer to the table, leaned down, and took a sniff of the soup. His nose wrinkled. "This smells off." He turned toward the hallway. "Jasmine!" he called. Moments later, a housekeeper appeared, wide-eyed. "Call the police," Bernard said quietly. "And bring a fresh spoon. We're going to have this tested." Marissa's face drained of color. Malik didn't move, but inside, he finally exhaled. Marissa backed up a step, then another. Her perfectly composed mask was slipping. "Bernard, this is ridiculous," she said, voice shaking now. "You're letting a stranger ruin your trust in me." But Bernard didn't look at her. He was looking at the soup, arms crossed, jaw tight. Jasmine returned with a fresh spoon and a phone in her hand, hovering anxiously. Bernard dipped the clean spoon into the bowl and carefully handed it to her. "Take it to the kitchen. Make sure no one touches it." Jasmine nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Marissa was pale now. "You have no idea what you're doing," she whispered. Bernard finally looked at her. "That's the problem, I didn't—" His tone was colder than Malik had expected. The silence between them felt sharp. Just then, the distant wail of a siren began to build outside. Marissa's eyes widened. "You're really calling the cops on your own wife?" "I'm calling the cops on someone who may have tried to poison me." His words landed like a slap. Malik, still frozen near the wall, flinched. The doorbell rang. 2 uniformed officers stepped into the house moments later, and everything began to move. Quickly questions, confusion, denial. But then came the small brown bottle Jasmine had found in the trash. It matched Malik's description exactly. The label half torn, the contents unknown but enough to warrant testing. Marissa said nothing. She didn't fight. She just lowered her eyes and let them cuff her wrists. Bernard didn't look triumphant. He looked broken. The house emptied slowly. The officers led Marissa out without a word, their footsteps echoing against the marble floor. The door closed behind them, and for a moment, the silence felt heavier than anything that had been said. Bernard stood in the middle of the room, staring at the place where his wife had just been. Then, as if waking up from a long, disorienting dream, he turned toward Malik. The boy stood still, his hands at his sides, eyes wide, but steady. Bernard studied him not with suspicion, but something closer to disbelief. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice rough around the edges. "Malik," the boy answered quietly. "And you saw everything?" Bernard asked. Malik nodded. "I didn't mean to spy. I was just hungry. I didn't think you'd believe me." Bernard shook his head slowly. "Neither did I. But you said something anyway." He walked over, pulling out a dining chair and motioning for Malik to sit. "You saved my life. That's not something I can repay with a handshake and a thank you." Malik hesitated, but sat down cautiously. Bernard sat across from him. "Do you have family?" Malik looked down. "Not anymore." Bernard let that answer sit. He nodded once, firmly, as if he'd made up his mind. "Then let's figure out what it means to have one again. You've earned more than a meal tonight, kid." Malik looked up, unsure what to say, but for the first time in a long while, he felt seen. The next few days were quiet but different. Bernard didn't talk much, not out of coldness, but reflection. Malik stayed in the guest room, which felt more like a hotel suite than anything he'd ever seen. At first, he didn't touch the bed. He laid on the floor like he was used to, but slowly, he let himself settle in. One morning, Bernard walked into the kitchen to find Malik carefully washing dishes he hadn't used. "You don't have to do that," Bernard said. Malik shrugged. "Feels weird not to help." Bernard smiled faintly and slid a plate next to him. "Then let's do it together." They didn't talk about Marissa. Not yet. But sometimes, in the quiet, Bernard would glance at the boy like he was still trying to understand how someone with nothing could offer so much. One afternoon, he sat Malik down and handed him a file. "It's school enrollment forms," he said, "and some paperwork. If you want to stay here, I'll make it official." Malik stared at the folder, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "Why me?" he asked. Bernard leaned back. "Because when you had every reason to walk away, you stepped forward, and I think the world needs more of that." Malik nodded slowly, fingers tightening around the papers. For the first time in years, his life wasn't just about surviving, it was about starting over. And as the sun dipped low over the mansion's lawn, a strange warmth filled the air. Not just safety, something deeper, something like home.